Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophil and Stella is a sonnet sequence in ways similar to Petrarch's Canzonieri, with its mix of sonnets and songs. Let's look at one sonnet closely, sonnet number 1, and I think it has certain relationships to Petrarch's sonnet number 1. Sonnets have to be about love and about writing.
Loving in truth and fain in verse my love to show, that the dear she might take some pleasure of my pain. Pleasure might cause her read, reading might make her know, knowledge might pity win, and pity grace obtain. I sought fit words to paint the blackest face of woe, studying inventions fine, her wits to entertain, oft turning others' leaves, to see if thence would flow some fresh and fruitful showers upon my sunburned brain. But words come halting forth, wanting invention stay. Invention, nature's child, fled step dame studies blows, and others' feet still seemed but strangers in my way. Thus great with trial to speak, and helpless in my throes, biting my traunt pen, beating myself for spite. Fool, said my muse to me, look in thy heart and write. It's written in a new meter that's called the Alexandrine. It's a French meter that became popular at this period. It's a meter made up of 12 syllables, not 10, with the caesura usually at the 6th syllable, but there'll be movements along the line. In English, and in the case of Sidney, we call it iambic hexameter because it's made up of 6 feet. Loving in truth and fain in verse my love to show. How does it scan? Loving in truth and fain in verse my love to show. So it begins with trochaic inversion. Let's look at the rhyme scheme to see the form of this sonnet. Show, pain, know, obtain, woe, entertain, flow, brain, have stay. So already we see the octave is appearing, right? Blows, way, C, throws, and then spite. Now we get our couplet, spite, and right. The octave characterizes Astrophil as a true lover. Notice in the first line, he's described as loving in truth. And since love and poetry are always expected, he wishes or feigns to reveal the truth of his love in poetry, or in other words, in this sonnet, so that Stella might experience some of his suffering or pain within the pleasurable constraints of poetry. This is a Ciceronian idea of rhetoric: to teach, docere, to please, placere, and to persuade or convince, convincere. He wants her to have knowledge of his state as a true lover, that is, a lover who suffers. And in the process, by pleasing her through verse and knowing his condition, he will persuade her of his worthiness to be pitied. And I also love how the poet uses the figure of anadiplosis. That's that figure of repetition where a word at the end of the line is repeated at the beginning of the next line. He uses this figure to create a chain of hopeful possibilities. Pleasure of my pain, pleasure. It's a loose anadiplosis. He might her know, knowing. This is anadiplosis with polyptoton, the repetition of the root of a word, not the word itself.
Could you hear as well ploki, that simple repetition of a word with some sort of space between? There's the ploki, pity and pity. There's also another ploki that's built out of polyptoton, loving in truth and fain in verse my love. There's also another figure, epizeusis. It's a repetition without any spaces in between. Is through polyptoton again. Read, reading might make her know. And so as the octave continues, he begins to write. First, he uses inventio. That's another Ciceronian term. It means to find or seek the right words or the right imagery or the right setting, which we call the topoi or commonplaces in the brainstorming stage of creating a poem. He goes through inventio in order to please her. I sought fit words to paint the blackest face of woe, studying inventions fine, her wits to entertain her intelligence. He's looking for images from the rhetorical or the rhetorician's storehouse of imagery and themes and topics. That's what inventio is. But he also goes into other poets' books, looking into their leaves or pages, looking for inspiration from other poets to find something new for the purpose of pleasing and entertaining her. Often turning others' leaves to see if thence would flow some fresh and fruitful showers upon my sunburned brain. But there is a problem. That means the volta is about to happen on the 9th line. If you look back at the rhyme scheme, there is the sense of a opening tercet of that sestet in CDC. We see we're at the end of the octave and the beginning of the volta. But words came halting forth. He can't get his words to flow. They're halting because they lack rhetorical inventio. Notice that repetition of invention again. It's anadiplosis again. Here it's identified as natural. In other words, it's associated with the allegorical figure of nature. Natural invention, unfortunately, has to flee the beatings of his stepmother study. That's another allegorical figure for rhetorical training. Too much study affects your natural abilities. And even the other poets' meter or verse, their feet, and that's a Greek-Latin word that is being brought into the syllabic system. The accentual syllabic system is now being conceived in Greco-Latin, or shall we say, classical terms of versification or prosody. Their meter or verse doesn't work. And he's tripping over their verse. It's a clever allusion to Greek and Latin versification, right? Like he can't even walk right with their feet. And then there's that final tercet, possible final tercet, that starts with another little volta, that thus, which is a new take, a new conclusion. Beginning of the second one. Thus great with child to... There's some mixed metaphors here. The poet, pregnant, great with child to speak. It's an odd allusion to Ovid, who associated sex and writing one night, either a book or a child. And then he's overwhelmed by love. Think of Garcilaso de la Vega, feeling undone. So he beats himself up. And then there's a concluding response. A new allegorical figure appears for inspiration, and that figure is the muse. The line is clever, metrically because it stresses 2 points. Fool, said my muse to me. Caesura in the traditional pause after the 6th syllable. That's that strong, weak, weak, strong you've seen before. That trochaic inversion you tend to expect in the first hemistiche or the first half line. What you did not expect after the caesura is its repetition in the fourth foot. Look in thy heart and write. That stress before the caesura, and now the trochaic stress at the end of the caesura, it produces stress clash. It's a very jarring piece of advice. Fool, said my muse to me, look in thy heart and write. Fool, look, not in the rhetorical prescriptions and the practices of other poets, but look inside yourself and write from the heart. This is an important moment. This is a new concept drawn from antiquity. It's a divorce from the medieval games of poetry. It's not even in a medieval meter, although the Alexandrine's origins are in the 13th century. This is a fresh new line. It's a long line. It announces a new program for literature that will be embraced later by the Romantics. Inspiration. This is the same ideal all of you hold about poetry and the true way to write. That's why medieval literature seems so odd and strange to you. To me, it seems utterly postmodern. This seems real and fresh, and it also announces a success, that the poetry that follows will be real, true, and inspired. And it will also be true self-expression. It will not be an imitation of Petrarch. And you can see the disruption of the Petrarchan model in the way he undoes the Petrarchan form. Sure, there's an octave. Isn't that where Astrophil is being conventional, looking for inspiration in old books like Petrarch? But then there's that volta, the but that creates a disjunction between the content and the form. And it is both the beginning of a sestina and it is not. It's a quatrain and a couplet. But look how crazy this is, this mixing of the two traditions. You can see there's the Petrarchan volta. There's the Petrarchan secondary turn or second volta. And then you have the rhymed couplets, which is the English. Astrophil and Stella is filled with these unexpected twists and turns. Finally, there was another layer of sound that makes the poem so pleasurable, especially for Stella. And it's alliteration in the letter F. If you move through the poem following that letter, we move from desire, feign, to the rhetorical process of composition, fit words and inventions fine, all to express his face of woe. Then the recognition that it's not working, that the invention has fled, and then studies harsh blows. Do this, do that, study the rules of poetry, follow them, which leads to the poet's feet, until the end, when all this is described as foolish. So let's listen to it again.
Loving in truth and fain in verse my love to show, that the dear she might take some pleasure of my pain. Pleasure might cause her read, reading might make her know, knowledge might pity win, and pity grace obtain. I sought fit words to paint the blackest face of woe, studying inventions fine, her wits to entertain, oft turning others' leaves, to see if thence would flow some fresh and fruitful showers upon my sunburned brain. But words come halting forth, wanting invention stay. Invention, nature's child, fled step dame studies blows, and others' feet still seen but strangers in my way. Thus great with trial to speak, and helpless in my throes, biting my traunt pen, beating myself for spite. Fool, said my muse to me, look in thy heart and write.
Alright guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell.